How's it going everybody? Welcome back to Switch Stars. My name's Luke, and it's been quite some time since I played a shmup on the Switch, but today on the channel we're taking a look at Vostok 2061, a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up which comes to us from the most unexpected of publishers, that being Big Way Games, the same publisher who brought us all those hentai games, so I was a little dubious as to the quality of this one. But let's check it out, find out whether it's worth your time and cash, and whether or not it has more depth than a tile swapping puzzle game. So a little light on the story this one, as is the case with most shmups I've played over the years, but the plot in Vostok 2061 is pretty cut and dry. A few generations ago, a bunch of colonists settled in a rather unusual solar system where all of the planets were not quite planets and instead were some kind of organic formations, but over time every single settler in the system vanished. They then started to reappear, but appear to have been transformed into extremely hostile zombie-like creatures, ultimately starting a war and an assault on your mother base, Vostok 2061. And so, as the newest recruit of the Earth Aviation Academy, it's your job to deal with them and get to the bottom of whatever has happened here. Like I said, pretty standard stuff which sets the scene for us, but very little else, with the story presented to us as a wall of text, and there's pretty much nothing else narrative-wise as we work our way through the game, so a bit of a shame really. But it is a shmup and gameplay is usually the main focus in these ones, so let's find out if that's any good. Now, gameplay opens with a bit of a tutorial as we're taken through a series of wave-based encounters with trashed enemies ejected from a portal in front of us. This gets us used to the basic mechanics of the game, but if you've played a shmup before, it's pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. We move around with the left thumbstick or D-pad, can shoot with the trigger and launch missiles with the A button, and aside from the shooting and avoiding shit, we're also introduced to a few of the game's pickups which provide us with alternative weapon types to check out, which we can switch between using the L and R buttons, and health pickups obtained from blue glowing enemies or floating containers. After completing the tutorial though, we're then straight into the real thing and are dropped into a prep menu where we can select from 3 different spaceships, which essentially act as the difficulty levels, with each of them from easiest to hardest sacrificing armour for movement speed, but other than this there's nothing separating one of them from the other. Now, we'll get back to the rest of the menu shortly, but dropping into our first mission, our objective in this one is pretty simple. Work our way through the level, blasting enemies whilst simultaneously escorting a cargo ship through the hostile territory, defending it from enemy attacks, and the game has a couple of different set pieces like this, but the vast majority of the levels are your standard vertical shmup formula of survive until the end of the level and then destroy a boss enemy to complete it. Now, as a genre, shmup mechanics are generally focused heavily around the combat, and what's almost immediately noticeable in Vostok is the somewhat unconventional way in which the combat is handled. Rather than being one-hit kills, basic enemies take several bullets to take down, and your standard impulse gun feels woefully underpowered, with some of the bigger enemies feeling like real bullet sponges. And while you do unlock several other weapons as you progress through the game, pickups are few and far between, and each of the weapons comes with limited ammo, so you'll almost always be back to using your standard gun before you reach the end of levels. The same thing though applies to enemy bullets. Instead of killing you in a single hit, they'll slowly chip away at your health bar, and avoiding them is pretty much impossible due to the sheer amount of enemies you'll face, and the fact that the projectiles they fire are far too small, move far too quickly, and often become obscured against the level's busy backdrops. Most of the damage you're going to be taking will be from colliding with enemies, which, even on easy difficulties, removes a significant portion of your health, so a lot of your time will actually be spent avoiding them. But the health pickups are reasonably frequent, and easy mode is pretty much a cakewalk. Now, when it comes to level variety, like I said, there are a few minor set pieces in the game, but overall they're pretty straightforward, with a ton of different enemies thrown at you and a few occasions when you need to weave back and forth through indestructible terrain. but the main difference comes with the aesthetics of levels and the enemy types that you'll face. Enemies range from your basic fighters, dreadnoughts and battleships, to tanks, drones and fixed gun emplacements, but there are also a few different environmental hazards such as meteor fields and laser spewing death balls. Occasionally you'll also face off against a sub-boss with a larger health bar, and these encounters offer the most challenging gunfights in the game with some bullet hell-like projectile spreads to deal with, but again the bullets they fire are incredibly difficult to dodge in this one, and on easy mode the damage is negligible. All in all though, while the variety is definitely there with the enemies, unfortunately it feels like there's been very little thought put into most of the spawn patterns and things are just way too chaotic for their own good. Personally, I'd much rather face smaller numbers of enemies with larger numbers of projectiles but actually have the ability to avoid them rather than just blasting my way through relentless streams of enemies whose projectiles I can't actually avoid, or as the case may be, don't need to avoid. And when it comes to the game's bosses, again, there's just very little thought put into them. Each of them spews out a torrent of bullets at you, which are impossible to dodge, and aside from your basic impulse gun, most of the other weapons will take them down relatively quickly, with the missiles tearing them to shreds in a matter of seconds. Now, between levels you're taken back to that prep screen, and as you progress through the game you'll unlock each new weapon type in turn. Prior to starting a level, you'll spend the points you've earned from killing enemies to refill your ammo for each of these, but ammo levels are capped and you'll usually have enough points to refill all of them, so the whole thing is rendered meaningless and is really just a complete waste of time. Finally, there are 8 evil alien fish hidden throughout the game for you to find and shoot, though I never found them all, so I don't really know what purpose they actually serve. Overall though, Vostok 2061 is a reasonably well put together shmup which for the price offers a reasonably decent gameplay experience. However, it doesn't really have anything outstanding to offer in terms of its mechanics, and the gameplay itself is ultimately flawed due to overwhelming amounts of enemies and underwhelming bullet mechanics. One final point to note is that after reaching the final level of the game, which, spoiler alert, requires you to survive a constant stream of enemies whilst chipping away a massive health bar, after doing so, nothing actually happens and the level fails to end. So currently the game is unbeatable, and the only way to replay any of the previous levels is to start a new game, losing all of your progress in the process. All in all, a mediocre shmup, but certainly better than another hentai puzzle game. So the visuals in this one are definitely the most standout aspect of it, featuring some highly detailed 2D and 3D artwork, and I really liked the overall aesthetic of Vostok. I thought the backgrounds leaned into that feeling of exploring these organic planet formations, and the enemies all looked pretty good, with some decent visual effects for the weapons and explosions. Though like I said, those bullets do tend to get lost amongst the busy backgrounds and could have definitely done with being a little larger, but ultimately it really doesn't matter that they aren't, and the game performs well throughout, so no performance issues to speak of. Audio wise, the sound effects are all pretty decent. We get some punchy weapon effects and some old school arcade vibes from the pickups, but the music is a little hit and miss in my opinion, with the vast majority of it being slow paced hard rock tunes, whilst a singular electronica track stood out as being the most appropriate genre for the gameplay. Overall, a mixed bag really in terms of the audio and visual. So in conclusion then, Vostok 2061 is one of those shmups which has a lot of good ideas going on, but is ultimately let down by the execution of them. It's by no means a bad game, and for someone new to the genre, it'll probably offer an enjoyable enough gameplay experience, albeit an entirely unmemorable one, but like me, seasoned veterans will likely be disappointed by its lack of challenge, or alternatively by its frustratingly imbalanced combat mechanics, which rely less on skillful gameplay and avoiding projectiles and more on taking down enemies and avoiding colliding with them. But the weapons system also leaves a lot to be expected with this one, and the soft lock at the end of the game is also a bit of a shame. Overall though, For Rain, Vostok 2061 is getting a generous 3 out of 5 stars from me. It's not a bad little shmup, but it's by no means a standout entry in the genre, especially when compared with some of the other high quality shmup titles that the Switch has to offer. With that said though, are you a shmup fan, and did you pick this one up, and do you agree or disagree with my judgment on this one? Let me know down below, and feel free to share some of your favourite shmups, as I'm always looking for new ones to dive into. But for now, drop a like if this one helped you out, subscribe to the channel for more Nintendo Switch reviews and content, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.